Words like fact and fabulous, right? But when you really dig into their origins, they tell a story that's, well, it's often far stranger than fiction.
Absolutely. It's quite something.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into the F section of this fantastic dictionary of word histories we found. And honestly, what we uncovered in there is just full of these unexpected revelations.
It really is. We've got this incredible source, this dictionary, and it's packed.
Right. And our mission really is to unearth the most important nuggets, trace these linguistic lineages like true detectives.
Linguistic detectives, I like that.
We're trying to give you a shortcut, maybe to being truly well-informed in a way you might never have considered, offering those genuine aha moments about the very language you use every single day.
And it's truly remarkable, isn't it, how often the origins of words directly contradict how we use them now.
Or how one single ancient root can just branch out into wildly different concepts. It's amazing.
Exactly. We'll be connecting the dots between seemingly unrelated F words today. And by the end of this deep dive, it might just fundamentally change the way you think about language itself.
I think it will.
And this whole journey, it raises a really important question, I think. How much of our understanding of the world, maybe even our shared realities, is subtly shaped by these hidden histories, these secret lives of the words we use all the time?
That's deep.
We're going to explore how that fundamental human act of making things can sometimes twist into making up untruths.
Yeah, the making versus faking idea.
And how even the most positive, glowing adjectives we use today might have once described things that just weren't real.
So let's begin with a group of words that really get at the very essence of creation. Shaping things, bringing things into being.
The making family.
Exactly. But as we'll see, this act of making can sometimes twist into something else entirely. It leads us from, physical construction to abstract deception, all from, a shared linguistic DNA.
It's a fascinating starting point.
Okay, so our first word, fabric. Now, we commonly associate this with textiles, right? Cloth, material.
Sure, what you wear.
But its history reveals a much grander, sort of more substantial origin. This word arrived in English late 15th century, came directly from the Old French fabrique, which itself came from Latin fabrica.
And fabrica was a powerful word. It meant something skillfully produced.
Right. And that goes back even further to faber, which literally meant a worker in material like metal or stone.
So you picture a skilled craftsman, a faber, maybe a blacksmith, maybe a stonemason, carefully shaping raw materials into something solid, something lasting.
That dedication to skilled craftsmanship is right there at the very root of fabric.
It really is. The skill is embedded in it.
And what's truly interesting, I think, is that originally a fabric wasn't something you'd wear at all.
No, not clothes.
Its earliest recorded meaning was actually a building or a structure. Think about how we still use that phrase, the fabric of society.
Yeah, that makes sense now. It still carries that weight, doesn't it? A foundational structure, something integral, holding things together.
Totally. And later it also referred to a machine or an appliance. Again, emphasizing something constructed, functional, an object.
Still something made.
Exactly. It wasn't until the mid-18th century, quite a bit later, that its core sense of something made really narrowed down to cloth, textile, which is how we primarily use it today for any manufactured material.
But that older meaning didn't vanish entirely, did it?
No, you're right. That earlier meaning, the actual building structure, the roof, floors, walls, that sense has persisted since the mid-17th century.
It's got layers.
It really does. It's a remarkable journey, isn't it? From the monumental scale of bricks and mortar all the way down to the intricate delicacy of threads. And it's all unified by that fundamental idea of being made by human skill, by human ingenuity.
This evolution of fabric is quite illuminating when you lay it out like that. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights how language often abstracts these concrete actions into broader concepts. How so? Well, the word began by embodying tangible, skilled creation, from a blacksmith's forge to maybe a grand cathedral. This linguistic thread of skilled production is inherent in the word's essence.
It reminds us that at its heart, fabric is about intentional, crafted existence.
Exactly. It underscores how foundational that concept of making really is to how we understand the world around us.
And, closely related to fabric is the verb fabricate.
Ah, yes. Fabricate.
This word arose in late Middle English, directly from the Latin fabricare, which just meant manufacture.
Simple enough.
So initially, it was about straightforward, honest making. You'd fabricate a product or you'd fabricate a building, meaning you genuinely manufacture it, construct it.
Right, no funny business.
But here's the surprising shift. The twist in its tail, and it's a profound one. Towards the end of the 18th century, fabricate took on this deeply negative sense to make up, invent a lie.
That's the kicker, isn't it? It's truly fascinating how this single word, rooted in genuine constructive creation, developed an almost exclusive association with deception.
It really did.
It started as a term for manufacturing or constructing something tangible and real, but within, a few centuries, the very act of making shifted in this specific word to making up something false.
Yeah.
This linguistic turn is quite telling. It suggests maybe a growing societal awareness, or perhaps a deepening cynicism around the idea that something can be made with the explicit intent to deceive rather than to genuinely build or create for a positive purpose.
That makes sense. Like we became more aware of manipulation.
Possibly, and the word fabricate now, it's almost exclusively used in its pejorative sense, a negative or derogatory one. It's completely eclipsed its innocent origins as just a synonym for build or manufacture.
It really has. You almost never hear it used positively anymore.
No. It's a powerful reminder of how a word's negative connotation can completely overshadow its original meaning. And it might reflect a shift in how society perceives the integrity of creation itself.
Then we have facsimile, which clearly belongs to this family of making words, and it serves as a lovely contrast to fabricate, actually.
Ah, the good twin, perhaps?
Maybe. This one was originally written as two separate words, facsimile, back in the late 16th century. It comes from modern Latin. It combines the Latin fac, which is the imperative form of facere, meaning make.
Make, like an order.
Exactly. And simile, the neuter of similes, meaning like. So facsimile literally means make like.
Make it like the original. Simple.
Precisely. Its meaning is very specific, denoting the making of an exact copy, usually of writing or images. And of course, in modern times, it got abbreviated to fax.
Ah, the trusty fax machine. Remember those?
Oh, yes. So this word truly reinforces that pure, direct connection to facere, to make something like something else. It shows a really straightforward meaning of precise creation in stark contrast to the deceptive turn that fabricate took.
It's like the honest, meticulous cousin in the making family.
I like that. While fabricate veered off into the murky waters of deceit, facsimile held firm to its original precise meaning of accurate reproduction.
Integrity in making.
Now, here's a word that consistently throws me for a loop when I revisit its history.
Fact.
Oh, fact. Yeah, this one's a journey.
You might think it's always meant truth or reality, right? That seems obvious.
Seems like it should have.
But can you believe that fact started out meaning something as simple as an act or a feat?
Just something someone did?
Yeah. It came into English in the late 15th century from the Latin factum, which is the neuter past participle of facere, meaning do. So literally it just meant a thing done.
A thing done. Wow.
And it gets even more complicated. For a period, it even developed a more negative sense. A bad deed, a crime. Right, like we still hear in legal phrases today, before the fact or after the fact. That's referring to someone's involvement in a crime, before or after it happened.
Exactly. That echo is still there. But then, in this truly astonishing semantic journey, the earliest current sense of fact, meaning truth, reality, only dates from the late 16th century.
Relatively recent in linguistic terms.
So how does a word go from describing a simple action or even a criminal act to signifying something as fundamental as truth or reality? That seems like a monumental leap.
It truly is a monumental shift, and it raises a fascinating question, doesn't it, about how society validated knowledge and reality back then.
How so?
Well, for a word to go from a mere deed, particularly a negative one, as in before the fact,
Yeah.
literally meaning truth or reality, that suggests a profound societal evolution.
Okay.
Perhaps it's because actions, especially those that are recorded or witnessed, became the irrefutable evidence, the ultimate truth of what occurred, making them the objective facts of a situation separate from their moral implications.
Huh. Like the deed speaks for itself.
Kind of. It's as if deeds themselves, once performed, left this undeniable footprint of reality that you couldn't argue with.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
And the term factual, which was recorded from the mid-19th century and patterned after actual, simply builds on this, just solidifying its link to verifiable objective truth. It really underscores language's capacity to absorb and reflect these profound changes in how we perceive and validate reality.
Okay, and if fact started out as an act or feat, then feat is the word that admirably kept that original, more positive sense.
Right. It held on to the good part.
It came into late Middle English from the Old French fait, also directly from the Latin factum. So, same root.
Same origin, different path.
While its early examples had the general sense of action or deed, its current meaning has, thankfully maybe narrowed to achievement, a noteworthy act, something remarkable and impressive.
Something to be proud of.
Exactly. So while fact veered off to represent objective truth, feat retained the positive association of a remarkable action. They both started from the same root of a thing done, but took very different yet equally valid paths.
It's a great example of how sister words can specialize their meanings over time.
Yeah, it really is.
This divergence is quite telling, isn't it? While fact became about verifiable, objective truth, feat continued to celebrate exceptional actions and accomplishments.
Two sides of the doing coin.
It highlights how language can specialize meanings even from a common root, carving out distinct semantic territories for concepts that were once much closer. It's almost as if language needed both an objective marker for reality and a celebratory marker for human achievement, and these two words perfectly filled those niches.
That's a neat way to put it. Okay, next in our making family is fashion.
Ah, fashion, style.
This word, which we associate so strongly with clothing and style, comes from Middle English, from the Old French facin, which itself stems from the Latin factio, again from facere, meaning do, make.
Still rooted in making.
Absolutely. So early meanings of fashion included make, shape, or appearance, as well as a particular make or style. In fact, get this, the phrase out of fashion once literally meant out of shape, implying something physically misshapen or ill-formed.
Really? Out of shape? That's funny.
Isn't it? It was in the mid-16th century that the word came to specifically denote a mode of dress currently adopted by society, meaning what's in vogue.
The modern sense we know.
Right. Shakespeare, for instance, famously used in fashion and out of fashion to mean precisely in vogue or out of vogue.
So he cemented that meaning.
Seems like it. So fashion beautifully captures the idea of making or shaping something into a particular style, directly linking back to that core facere root. It's the act of shaping appearance, both physically and culturally, into something considered desirable at a particular time.
Shaping perception, in a way.
Exactly. Now, our final word in this section, still very much part of the making family, is the verb forge.
Forge, like a blacksmith. Or something else.
Exactly. That duality is key. This one, appearing in Middle English, comes from Old French forger, which is directly from the Latin fabricaire. Yes, the very same fabricaire that gave us fabricaire.
Wow, okay. Back to fabricaire.
And it also traces back to fabrica. Its original meaning was purely about creation, shape, a metal object, or make, construct, often associated with a smithy or blacksmith, literally shaping metal with fire and hammer.
Honest work, skilled creation.
Right. But here's where we see that striking parallel to fabricate. The darker side, its use in connection with fraudulent imitation, arose early in the word's history.
Early on, not later.
Apparently quite early. Think about it. You can have a blacksmith diligently forging a tool, creating something real and useful through skill and effort, a true act of craftsmanship.
The positive forging.
But then almost from the beginning, you could also have someone forging a signature or a document, creating a deceptive imitation.
The negative forging. Wow. This parallel between forge and fabricate is incredibly strong and thought-provoking, isn't it?
It really is. Both starting from making.
Both words originating from the Latin facere and fabricare, meaning to make or to construct, develop this deceptive connotation alongside their original meanings of skilled, legitimate creation.
It makes you wonder why.
It suggests, perhaps, a deep-seated human understanding, reflected in language, that the very act of creation, of bringing something into being, inherently carries with it the potential for deceit.
The power to create is also the power to fake.
Something like that. The skill and ingenuity required to make something can be perverted into the ability to make up or falsify something, exploiting the very trust we place in made objects or ideas. It's a fascinating linguistic reflection of maybe human nature's duality.
So what have we learned from this first batch? We've seen how words rooted in the fundamental act of making can swing wildly, from creating precise copies like a facsimile or solid buildings.
To inventing outright lies, like fabricating a story or forging a document.
This tension between creation and deception in language is a really powerful theme, and it brings us naturally to the broader landscape of truth, untruth, and perception, exploring what we believe, what we invent, and what truly exists.
Yeah, moving from making things to making things up.
Exactly. If the very act of making can lead to faking, then our next set of words truly takes us deeper into that fascinating territory. What we believe, what we invent, what truly exists.
It's a linguistic exploration of reality, myth, and the subtle ways our language defines them, and sometimes blurring the lines in really surprising ways.
Let's begin with fable. Now, this word, coming into Middle English from Old French fable, and ultimately from the Latin fabula, meaning story, has its root in fare, which means to speak.
So, related to speaking, telling.
Right. Fundamentally, a fable is something spoken, a narrative designed to be told. In its early use, it referred to any general fictitious narrative, any story that wasn't necessarily true.
Any old made-up story.
Pretty much. But its current, more specific meaning, a short story conveying a lesson, usually through the portrayal of animals as the main characters, was also present early on.
Like Aesop's fables.
Exactly. We most commonly associate this with Aesop, the semi-legendary Greek storyteller. The connection to speaking and storytelling inherently involves imagination or invention, setting the stage for narratives that may or may not be literally true, but which always aim to convey a deeper truth or moral.
The story itself might be fictional, but the point is true.
Right, and this leads us beautifully to fabulous.
Ah, fabulous.
In late Middle English, fabulous directly stemmed from French fabuleur, or Latin fabulosus, both meaning celebrated in fable, from fabula, which meant discourse, narrative, or story.
So straight from fable.
Yep. So the early senses of fabulous were quite literal. If something was fabulous, it meant it was known through fable, or even explicitly unhistorical, belonging to the realm of fiction or myth, not fact.
So fabulous originally meant fake or mythical.
Essentially, yes, not real. But here's the aha moment. The truly astonishing semantic expansion that makes this word so intriguing. The notion of astonishing crept in, leading to associations with incredible.
Incredible, like hard to believe.
Exactly. And this incredible was interpreted in two wildly contradictory ways.
Okay.
On one hand, by the mid-16th century, it meant beyond belief in a negative sense, implying something so unbelievable it must be untrue or mythical.
Still linked to the not real idea.
Right. But on the other hand, by the mid-20th century, it came to mean overwhelmingly positive. Wonderful, marvelous is an adjective of high praise.
Wow. So it flipped completely.
It really did. Think about the colloquialism fab for marvelous, which dates from the 1960s and was famously popularized by the Fab Four, the Beatles.
Right. The Fab Four, they weren't untrue.
Not at all. So how did a word meaning untrue become absolutely wonderful?
That's a great question. It's a fantastic example of language reflecting cultural shifts. How does a word like fabulous manage to encompass both untrue and wonderful simultaneously?
It seems impossible.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests that things perceived as beyond belief can be interpreted in vastly different ways by society. They can be seen as negative, mythical, fictional, not to be trusted.
The original sense.
Or as overwhelmingly positive, astonishing, marvelous, awe-inspiring. The modern sense. It's a beautiful illustration of how cultural perception molds language, turning something legendary and unhistorical into something highly laudable and desirable.
So the meaning shifted based on how we felt about things being unbelievable.
Seems like it. The irony of calling something fabulous today when its root explicitly means unhistorical or fictional is quite striking. It showcases language's incredible capacity for complex, even contradictory evolution based on shifts in human sentiment and emphasis.
Language is flexible, all right. Now, if we're talking about untruths, we can't ignore fake.
Fake, a very common word now.
This word, which is late 18th century slang, has an uncertain origin. Some linguists suggest it might be related to the German fegen, meaning sweep or thrash.
Yeah.
Kind of aggressive.
Huh. Uncertain, though.
Yeah. Its evolution is interesting. First, in early 19th century, thieves can't. That specialized jargon used by criminals, it meant tamper with something for deception.
So, physically messing with something to trick people.
Exactly. It had this very physical, illicit connotation. Then, its current, more general meaning of counterfeit or inauthentic arose in the early 20th century.
So it moved from action to quality.
Right. It's a word that's consistently been about deception, moving from a physical act of tampering to the more abstract concept of inauthenticity.
It's a relatively recent addition to the lexicon compared to some of the ancient roots we're exploring today, but its rapid assimilation into the language for counterfeit speaks volumes.
What do you think that tells us?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it suggests maybe a growing concern for authenticity in society, particularly as commercial transactions and the circulation of goods became more widespread and complex.
More opportunities for fakes, maybe.
Perhaps. The shift from a potentially physical, action-based slang to an abstract concept of inauthenticity is kind of a miniature reflection of larger societal changes, where the veracity of what we encounter daily became a more pressing issue.
Interesting point. Then there's fallacy.
Fallacy. Sounds illogical or illogical.
Right. This one, dating from the late 15th century, comes directly from the Latin fallacia, which means deceiving, stemming from phallax and ultimately from phalaire, meaning to deceive.
So, deception right from the start.
Absolutely. Its early uses were quite broad. Deception guile, referring to the act of tricking someone. By the late 16th century, it became a specific term in logic for a deceptive or misleading argument.
Like a logical fallacy.
Exactly. Something that sounds plausible, but is fundamentally flawed in its reasoning. And then in the early 17th century, it generalized to a delusive notion based on false reasoning, a mistaken belief.
So, from its very root, fallacy has been unequivocally about deception, whether in action or in thought.
A clear, consistent lineage of untruth, a word that is always pointed directly at error or guile. No major twist here.
Unlike the next one, perhaps.
Ah, yes. Here's where we get another fascinating twist. A dramatic semantic reversal with the word fallible.
Fallible, meaning capable of error.
Right. Coming into late Middle English from medieval Latin fallibilis, it also traces back to the Latin fallere, to deceive, same root as fallacy.
Okay, so far so good.
Now here's the key distinction. The Latin adjective fallibilis originally meant deceitful, implying something or someone that actively deceives.
Wait, so fallible used to mean deceitful, like trying to trick you.
Exactly. But then, in late medieval Latin, its meaning completely reversed to mean deceivable, that is, liable to be deceived, or, more commonly in English today, liable to make errors. It's a complete flip.
Wow. That is a reversal. What's fascinating here is how it moved from an active sense of deceiving to a passive sense of being deceivable or prone to error.
Yeah, from the perpetrator to the potential victim, or just someone making a mistake.
Precisely. This raises an important question about how our understanding of human imperfection became enshrined in this word. It highlights a profound shift in focus from the perpetrator of deception to the inherent human capacity for mistakes, for being misled, or for simply getting things wrong.
It's like the language evolved to be more forgiving of errors.
Or at least to acknowledge them as part of the human condition. It's as if it recognized that even the best intentions or the most careful reasoning can still lead to errors, that deception can also be, in a sense, self-inflicted through simple human frailty. It speaks to a kind of linguistic humility about our own limitations.
Linguistic humility, I like that. And then, directly from the same root as fallacy and fallible, we have false.
False. Straightforwardly negative.
Pretty much. This word, arriving in Old English as false, meaning fraud, deceit, is from the Latin falsum, also meaning fraud, falsehood, which is the past participle of fallere, to deceive.
Back to faller again. It's a busy root.
It really is. It was reinforced in Middle English by the Old French false. So false has always consistently been about untruth. It carries dual connotations, erroneous, contrary to fact, and deceitful sham.
Both wrong and intentionally tricky.
Right. The verb falsify, meaning prove a statement to be false, or alter information so as to mislead, also dates from late Middle English. This word has steadfastly maintained its negative association with untruth, directly from its deceptive root. Offers no surprising twists, just pure, unadulterated falsehood.
Some words just stick to their guns.
Seems so. Okay, next, let's look at feign.
Feign, to pretend.
Exactly. This word, which appeared in Middle English, comes from Old French feign, the stem of fandre, from the Latin finger, meaning to mold, contrive.
Finger, to mold, like shaping clay.
Kind of. In Old French, fandre had a specific meaning. Avoid one's duty by false pretenses, shirk, like pretending to be sick to get out of work.
Ah, okay. Skiving off.
Right. But when it entered English, it also took on senses directly from its Latin root, like make something or invent a story, excuse, or allegation.
So making or inventing.
which naturally led to its current meaning. Make a pretense of a feeling or response, such as she feigned nervousness or he feigned ignorance.
So feign beautifully links that physical act of molding or shaping something with the abstract act of contriving or pretending. It's about shaping a false reality, crafting an outward appearance that doesn't reflect an inner truth.
Molding your behavior to deceive. And from that very same Latin root, finger, meaning to form, contrive, we get fiction.
Fiction, also from finger, makes sense.
Right. Arriving in late Middle English from Old French fantasy and then Latin fictio, it also comes from finger. Its early sense was simply an invented statement, any made-up claim.
Like a fable, almost.
Yeah, similar territory. The application of fiction, specifically to literature, as we know it today, novels, plays only dates from the late 16th century. That's when narratives became recognized as distinct forms of made-up stories.
So fiction as a genre is relatively new.
In name, yes. Fictitious, meaning invented or not real, also appeared in the early 17th century, based on the Latin fictitious, which again comes from finger.
All roads lead back to finger here.
It seems so. So fiction is directly related to feign, emphasizing the creative but not necessarily true act of forming or contriving narratives, whether in a fleeting pretense like feigning illness or a sweeping epic like a novel.
The scale of the making up differs, but the root is the same.
Exactly. Building on that theme of invented things, figment is another word linked to finger, that Latin root for to form or contrive.
Figment, like figment of the imagination.
Precisely. Also from late Middle English, it comes from the Latin figmentum, again related to finger. Initially, figment meant quite broadly an invented statement or story.
Similar to early fiction or fable.
Right. But its current sense, which we almost exclusively use in the phrase figment of the imagination, dates from the early 17th century. It powerfully reinforces the idea of making up something, but specifically within the confines of the mind, something purely imagined, a mental construct.
An invention of thought. Not necessarily meant to deceive, but certainly not real in a tangible sense.
Exactly. Now, for a seemingly innocent word with a charmingly uncertain past, fib.
A little white lie. A fib.
Right. This informal word for a lie appeared in the mid-16th century. Its origin is rather intriguing. One prominent theory suggests it's a shortening of an obsolete compound word, fable, which meant nonsense or idle talk.
Fable. That sounds silly.
It does. And fable itself was apparently a reduplication of fable. Fable became fable.
So fib might just be baby talk for fable.
Kind of. So what does this all mean? The seemingly harmless fib might actually be a silly, whimsical echo of fable, showing how even small untruths have long, complex linguistic roots, possibly linked to the very act of fanciful storytelling.
From grand stories with morals to simple white lies, the thread of invention runs through them.
Yeah.
It's a delightful etymological speculation, isn't it? The idea that a trivial fib might have a linguistic lineage connected to the grand moralistic fable suggests a continuity in human storytelling, from the profound to the playful, from allegories to trivial deceptions.
That's a nice way to put it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reminds us that even minor misdirections are part of a broader human tendency to craft narratives, whether for entertainment, instruction, or, slight self-preservation. It speaks to the inherent human capacity for both profound truth and petty untruth, all wrapped up in language.
Then we have folly.
Folie, madness, or maybe something else.
Both, actually. This word, dating from Middle English, comes from Old French folie, meaning madness, from fall, meaning fool. Foolish. So its original sense was clearly about irrationality, a lack of sense or good judgment.
Straight up foolishness.
Right. However, here's where it gets interesting. In modern French, folie also means delight, favorite dwelling, often referring to a beautiful but impractical house.
Ah, like an indulgence.
Exactly. And strikingly, in English, folly developed a dual modern sense. It can refer to a costly ornamental building serving no practical purpose. Think of those elaborate, often whimsical structures built on grand estates just for aesthetic pleasure, like a decorative temple or a miniature castle.
Right, architectural follies, built just because.
Precisely. This suggests a kind of beautiful but perhaps wasteful foolishness. The duality is curious, from outright madness to an architectural eccentricity that is admired despite its impracticality.
The word folly beautifully encapsulates this paradox. It's the madness that constructs something impractical yet delightful.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it tells us something profound about how society can come to view certain extravagances. An act of folly can be detrimental, foolish in a negative sense, but a physical folly can be an object of charm and even wonder, albeit one born of an impractical impulse.
It reflects a human fascination with both the absurd and the beautiful, often intertwined.
Definitely. It's a linguistic mirror to our changing societal understanding of value from purely utilitarian to encompassing aesthetic pleasure, even when it's economically irrational.
Our last word in this section, and one that remains consistently negative, is fraud.
Fraud, no ambiguity there.
None at all. This word came into Middle English from Old French fraud, which itself is directly from the Latin fraus, fraud, meaning unequivocally deceit, injury.
Deceit and injury. Nasty combination.
Right. So from its very beginning, fraud has signified intentional deception and harm. The adjective fraudulent, meaning characterized by fraud, also dates from late Middle English.
So unlike some of the other words we've explored that took surprising nuanced turns,
Fraud has steadfastly maintained its clear negative association with dishonesty and illicit gain. It's a word that is always called a spade, a lie, and a deception.
a deception. Some words just mean what they say.
What a journey through truth and lies. From the intentional deceit of fabricating to the accidental fallibility of humans.
And the imagined worlds of fables and fictions.
These words show us how deeply ingrained the concepts of truth and untruth are in our language. But sometimes words take an even more unexpected path, leading us to completely different realms of understanding, transforming from the mundane to the purely metaphorical.
Yeah, the really surprising leaps.
Sometimes words just decide to pack their bags and move to a completely new neighborhood of meaning. These F words offer some of the most delightful and surprising journeys.
Transforming from concrete objects or physical actions into abstract concepts or colorful, often quirky expressions, they reveal the sheer adaptability of language.
Let's start with facade. This word, adopted in the mid-17th century, comes from the French façade, which simply means face, patterned after the Italian facciata.
So the face of a building.
Primarily, yes. It was used to describe the front or principal face of a building, its outward architectural appearance. But here's the interesting metaphorical leap, showing language's ability to abstract. It started to be used in a figurative way from around the mid-19th century.
How so?
For example, you might say, her flawless public facade masked private despair.
Ah, okay. The front someone puts on.
Exactly. This traces a clear shift from a literal architectural front to a metaphorical mask, an outward appearance that might be deliberately constructed to hide an inner reality. It's the face a building presents, and then the face a person presents to the world.
Makes perfect sense as a metaphor.
And speaking of face, the word itself has given rise to some fantastic idioms that move far beyond its literal meaning.
Oh yeah, face is used in tons of expressions.
It came into Middle English from Old French. While we all know what a face is, its linguistic power extends far beyond the physical. Take the idiom, fly in the face of.
Meaning to defy something.
Right. This is taken literally from the notion of an aggressive dog attacking someone, charging at them face first. Figuratively, it means act in opposition to or defy, to openly contradict or challenge something.
Huh. Didn't know the dog origin. That's vivid.
Isn't it? Then there's the more recent colloquialism in your face, which arose in the U.S. in the 1970s.
Aggressive, confrontational.
Yeah. It's used both as a way of expressing scorn or defiance, as in, that was a real in-your-face victory, and as a phrase meaning blatant or unavoidable, as in, the evidence was so in your face no one could ignore it.
It highlights how the literal face becomes the canvas for expressive idioms, showing defiance, aggression, or undeniable directness.
Then there's facetious.
Facetious.
Well,
Joking, but maybe not always in a good way.
Exactly. This word, from the late 16th century, comes from French, facetieux, from the Latin facetieux, meaning jest, and facetious, meaning witty.
So originally just witty or funny.
Right. The general sense witty, amusing, was the first recorded meaning for facetious. Think of someone being genuinely witty and entertaining, lighthearted, and clever. However, its common current sense is flippant, carrying a connotation of irreverence or lack of appropriate seriousness.
So it got a bit of a negative edge. How did it shift from pure wit to something potentially dismissive?
Good question.
It's truly fascinating to trace the journey of facetious, from purely witty or amusing to our current understanding of flippant, which often carries that connotation of irreverence or even a subtle disrespect.
Yeah, like joking at the wrong time.
Exactly.
Hmm.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's almost as if society, over time, decided that too much wit without seriousness, or wit used inappropriately in certain contexts, could be a negative trait. This raises an important question. When did amusement, or a clever jest, tip over into perceived disrespect or a failure to take things seriously enough? It suggests a subtle cultural shift in how we value and interpret humor and seriousness in communication, and how a word can morph to reflect that evolving social expectation.
Okay, let's really unpack this next one because it's one of my favorites for its vivid imagery. Imagine a sailor
Okay.
standing on the deck of a ship, arms outstretched as wide as they can go, maybe holding a rope with knots, measuring the depth of the ocean beneath him.
Right, measuring the depth.
That's the literal origin of fathom.
Fathom, okay.
This word, from Old English "fextum," is of Germanic origin, related to the German faden, which means 6 feet. Its original sense, in the singular, was something which embraces, and in the plural, it literally meant the outstretched arms.
The outstretched arms, a
That's it.
fathom.
Exactly. This physical act directly gave rise to the word's use as a unit of measurement based on the span of outstretched arms, later standardized to 6 feet. So when a sailor would fathom the depth of the ocean, he was literally extending his arms to measure it.
That's incredible. So concrete.
But then, here's where it gets truly interesting. The sense understand, as a verb, is from that very same notion of embrace or encompass.
Ah, so you embrace an idea to understand it.
That's the metaphor. So when you fathom a complex idea, you're mentally embracing it, reaching out and grasping it with your mind, just like those outstretched arms measuring the ocean's depth. It's a beautiful, tangible metaphor for intellectual comprehension.
It's not just understanding about something, but truly comprehending its depth, its full scope.
Exactly. Try to picture it next time you use the word, that physical act of reaching out and encompassing behind the abstract meaning of deep understanding.
It's truly one of the most evocative etymologies we've discussed today. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows how deeply human physical experiences become the foundational basis for abstract thought and language.
Like our bodies shape our thoughts.
In a way, yes. The act of physically encompassing something to measure its depth transitions seamlessly into the mental encompassing of an idea to grasp its profound meaning. This highlights the deeply embodied nature of language and cognition, where our physical interactions with the world provide the very scaffolding for our intellectual concepts. It also makes you wonder what other abstract concepts have such a concrete physical origin.
Definitely food for thought. Moving on to fanatic and its hugely popular abbreviation, FAN.
Fanatic and fan, quite a difference in feel.
Right. Fanatic dates from the mid-16th century, originally as an adjective from the French fanatique or Latin fanaticus, and fanaticus itself meant of a temple inspired by a god, stemming from fanum, which meant temple.
Inspired by a god, like possessed.
Pretty much. It originally described behavior or speech caused by possession by a god or demon, a divine, almost frenzied inspiration, an intense, almost unhinged devotion rooted in the sacred.
Wow, really intense origins.
Totally. This led to the earliest noun sense, a religious maniac, which emerged in the mid-17th century. From divine inspiration and sacred frenzy, it narrowed to religious extremism.
Okay, still pretty negative.
But then we get our modern fan. The word fan, an abbreviation of fanatic, dates from the late 19th century in the U.S.
And suddenly, it's about baseball or pop music.
Exactly. Suddenly, that intense, even manic devotion once associated with a temple or a dangerous religious maniac became a casual term for someone enthusiastically devoted to a pop star, a sports team, a hobby, or any form of entertainment.
That's quite a dilution.
Isn't it? We even have fanzine, a U.S. coinage from the 1940s, a blend of fan and magazine. It's quite the transformation. From a word describing a potentially dangerous, divinely inspired zealot to someone who just really likes Taylor Swift or their favorite football team.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the transformation of fanatic is quite telling about cultural shifts. It started from a divine, almost manic possession, then narrowed to religious extremism, and finally, through abbreviation, became our everyday fan.
Just someone enthusiastic.
Right. Someone enthusiastically devoted to a pop star or sports team. This raises an important question. What does it say about our society that we've diluted a word once associated with spiritual frenzy or dangerous obsession into casual enthusiasm, often for commercialized entertainment?
That's a challenging question.
It reflects perhaps a secularization, maybe a commodification of intense devotion, transferring it from the sacred to the mundane, even the commercial. It's a kind of linguistic flattening of a powerful concept.
Hmm. Here's one of those delightful mysteries of language. A genuine head-scratcher.
Fiasco.
Fiasco.
A total mess up.
Right. This word, adopted in the mid-19th century, comes directly from Italian, and it literally means bottle or flask.
A bottle. How does that become a disaster?
That's the mystery. It came into English from the Italian phrase far fiasco, which literally translates to make a bottle. And yet, figuratively, this phrase means fail in a performance or a complete failure. So, fiasco came to mean a complete disaster or failure.
Make a bottle, fail completely. Why?
And the best part, even the linguistic detectives haven't cracked this one. Our source simply shrugs and says, the reason for the figurative sense remains unexplained.
Seriously, they just don't know.
Apparently not. So what does this all mean? It's a great example of how some linguistic leaps are just, well, they just are. There's no clear logical bridge we found, just a curious, unexplained jump from a humble bottle to a colossal failure. Sometimes language just does its own thing.
Language works in mysterious ways.
It certainly does. Another fascinating transformation, and one that gives us a wonderful visual, is farce.
Farce, like a silly comedy.
Exactly. Dating from the early 16th century, this is a French word that literally means stuffing, from farcir to stuff, which comes from the Latin farcire.
Stuffing, like for a turkey.
Yes. An earlier sense of farce was literally force meat stuffing, like the kind you put in a turkey. But then came the metaphorical use, comic interludes that were literally stuffed into the texts of religious plays.
Ah, so you stuffed jokes into serious plays.
That's the idea. Imagine these light-hearted, often bawdy bits of humor being physically shoved into a more serious or sacred performance to break it up, to add some levity. This led directly to its current usage, a comic drama featuring buffoonery, something full of silly, exaggerated humor and ridiculous situations.
You can almost visualize the jokes being stuffed into the narrative, creating something over the top and riotous. It makes perfect sense now.
Talk about a word with multiple personalities. Let's explore fell, a word that beautifully illustrates homographs words spelled the same, but with entirely different origins and meanings.
Right, like bat or bank. Fell.
When you hear fell, you might immediately think of a tree falling, right? Or perhaps a mountain.
Those are the common words?
But it can also mean deadly, or even an animal's hide. It just goes to show how much context matters when listening to or reading English.
Absolutely crucial.
So first we have fell, as in to cut down, like they felled a tree. This comes from Old English felon and is of Germanic origin. That's when we think of with logging.
Got it. Cut down.
Now, can you tell us about the fell, meaning a hill?
Certainly. Then you have fell, meaning a hill or a stretch of high moorland, as you might hear in descriptions of the fells of the Lake District in England. This is quite distinct, coming from Middle English, originating from Old Norse fall.
Okay, so from chopping down, we go to climbing up. That's already quite a jump. What about fell as in deadly?
Ah, that's another one entirely. Fell meaning deadly or ferocious, as in the phrase, in one fell swoop.
Right, one fell swoop.
This implies something sudden, powerful, and often destructive. This one is from Middle English, from Old French fell, which meant wicked person or felon. So fell here implies something cruel, fierce, or malevolent, carrying a much darker connotation.
Wow, from felon. Okay. And there's still another, right? The animal hide.
Indeed. Finally, fell meaning an animal hide or skin with its wool or hair. This is from Old English and is also of Germanic origin, related to words for skin or film.
So from chopping down trees, to climbing mountains, to describing a deadly blow, and finally to an animal's skin, it's a remarkable convergence of distinct words under one spelling.
This phenomenon of homographs like fell is a constant reminder of language's unpredictable nature. They appear identical in written form, yet carry distinct and often unrelated histories.
It forces us to appreciate the nuanced role of context in understanding language. Without it, communication would be utterly chaotic.
Each fell is a distinct word that happens to share a spelling, a testament to the layers of history in English.
Next, consider fodder.
Fodder, animal feed.
Mostly, yes. This word, from Old English fodor, is of Germanic origin, related to the German futter. Originally, fodder was a general word for food, any kind of nourishment,
Just food in general.
apparently. However, its use became more specific and is now largely restricted to dried food for cattle, like hay or straw, typically used for stall feeding.
Okay, the farm sense.
But here's the powerful and rather chilling figurative leap. The phrase cannon fodder, referring to young infantry soldiers, dates from World War I.
Ah, cannon fodder. That's grim.
It is. This is a stark and chilling shift from basic sustenance for animals to a grim metaphor for expendable human life in war. It transforms the concept of simple nourishment into a brutal illustration of dehumanization.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the semantic journey of fodder from a general term for food to dried animal feed and then dramatically to cannon fodder reflects profound shifts in human experience and warfare.
It really captures the horror.
It underscores the dehumanization that occurs in conflict, where individuals are reduced to mere sustenance for the war machine, to be consumed and expended. This raises an important question. How does language, through such stark metaphorical transformations, both reflect and shape our perception of grim realities like war?
Does it make it easier to accept?
That's the danger. It creates a shorthand that, while efficient, can numb us to the profound human cost.
Heavy stuff. Okay, now let's explore focus.
Focus, concentrate, center point.
Right. This word, adopted in the mid-17th century, has a beautiful and surprising origin. It comes from the Latin focus, which literally meant domestic hearth.
The fireplace, the center of the home.
Exactly. The central fireplace or gathering point of a home, a place of warmth, light, and centrality. The brilliant astronomer Johannes Kepler was the first to use it in a geometrical sense in 1604, hinting at an existing optical sense.
Kepler. So science took it over.
Seems like it. From the literal warmth and light of a domestic hearth, it transformed into the burning point of a lens, the precise point where light rays meet after reflection or refraction. Kepler's use was specifically as the burning point of a parabolic mirror, the geometrical focus of its curvature.
The focal point in optics. Got it.
And then, yet another leap, demonstrating language's incredible abstractive power. The figurative use of focus as the center of activity or center of attention dates from the early 19th century.
The center, like the hearth was the center.
Exactly. We even have the term focus group, which emerged in the 1980s in marketing and political contexts, referring to a group whose opinions become the central point of analysis.
It's remarkable how a word for a domestic fire became the bedrock for concepts of attention, centrality, and scientific precision.
From the hearth to the lab to the meeting room.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, focus is a beautiful example of how concrete physical concepts like the central warmth and light of a hearth can be abstracted into precise scientific terms like optical focus, and then into widely used metaphors for attention, concentration, and centrality.
It's a really clear path.
It raises an important question, though. Does the idea of a hearth still subtly influence our intuitive understanding of what it means to focus, as a central warming point of attention where things converge, where energy is gathered?
Maybe subconsciously.
Perhaps. It's a powerful testament to how language builds upon layers of meaning, from the deeply physical to the profoundly abstract, retaining echoes of its origins.
Okay, let's really unpack this next one, because it's truly unexpected and frankly, quite hilarious.
Oh, what have you got?
The word feisty, meaning excitable and assertive or full of spirit.
Feisty, yeah, like a spirited person.
It's a late 19th century U.S. slang word. It originated in dialect from an earlier noun, feist or fist, which meant simply a small dog, often a terrier, a small spirited dog.
Okay, feisty like a feist dog. Makes sense so far.
So far, so cute, right? A feisty little dog full of energy. But then we follow the etymological chain further back.
Uh-oh.
And here's the truly surprising and honestly a bit undignified part. Feist, in turn, came from fisting cur, which was a derogatory term for a small, yappy lapdog.
A fisting cur. That doesn't sound good.
No. And where did fisting cur come from? It came from Middle English fist, which literally meant to break wind.
Wait, break wind? As in?
Yes, as in flatulence. It itself was of West Germanic origin. Seriously, to break wind.
You're kidding. Feisty comes from farting dog.
Essentially, yes. How does a word go from describing the bodily function of a small, yappy dog to becoming a positive adjective for someone energetic and assertive? It's probably one of the most unexpected and frankly hilarious etymological journeys we'll encounter.
That is absolutely bizarre.
So what does this all mean? It's a perfect illustration of how words can wander down the strangest paths, picking up completely bizarre associations that eventually coalesce into a seemingly normal, even evocative modern meaning.
From a tiny, gassy lapdog to someone full of spirited assertiveness.
It's a testament to language's playful and often unpredictable nature.
It's indeed a delightful and somewhat undignified lineage for a word now used quite positively, isn't it? What's fascinating here is how the perceived characteristic of a small, yappy dog, perhaps its energetic, though somewhat uncontrolled nature, its tendency to be a bit noisy,
Yep.
could be humorously linked to its less refined biological functions, and then somehow, through linguistic evolution and the loss of its original crude association, translate into a descriptor of spirited human personality.
The embarrassing part got forgotten.
Pretty much. This raises an important question about the role of humor and even derogatory slang in shaping language, and how some words, despite their ignoble beginnings, can rise to respectable, even admired usage with their embarrassing past conveniently forgotten by most speakers.
Amazing. Finally, in this section, we have fiddle.
Fiddle, the instrument. Or messing around.
Both, and that's the story. The Old English word fiddle was simply a violin or a similar musical instrument, and originally it wasn't an informal or derogatory term at all.
Just a standard instrument name.
Right. It's related to the Latin vitulare, which meant celebrate a festival, be joyful, possibly from Vitula, a Roman goddess of joy. So a fiddle was a source of joy and celebration, a beautiful instrument.
Nice origins.
But the verb fiddle took a decidedly different turn. By the mid-16th century, it acquired the sense toy with idly, as in fiddling with your keys or fiddling with a knot.
Just messing about aimlessly.
Right, a light, often unproductive manipulation. And then, in the early 17th century, a darker meaning emerged as slang. Cheat or tamper with for dishonest purposes, as in fiddling the books or fiddling the figures.
Ah, the dishonest fiddling.
So it's a surprising journey from a musical instrument of joy to idle, aimless manipulation, and then to outright deception. It's almost as if the light, quick movements of playing the fiddle were abstracted into the light, quick, sometimes dishonest movements of tampering.
From music to mischief to manipulation.
The stories of these words truly remind us that language is a living, breathing thing, always adapting and sometimes playing delightful tricks on us.
From the literal warmth of a hearth to a flimsy, fabricated explanation.
The journey of an F word can be truly fantastic and unexpected. And speaking of journeys, some words really capture the essence of what it means for things to be both firm and fleeting, illustrating paradoxes inherent in our world.
Yeah, the real contradictions.
Our final category for this deep dive looks at words that encapsulate paradoxes, how something can be both stable and in constant motion, or lasting and temporary, all within the same linguistic family, often sharing the very same spelling.
It's a testament to the beautiful ambiguity and complexity of English.
Let's take fast. This word is a perfect example of a homograph with completely opposite primary meanings, a linguistic split personality.
Fast means slow, or fast means fast, both.
Exactly. First, there's fast meaning firmly fixed or steadfast, as in a fast friend, someone reliable and loyal, or holding fast to a belief, meaning you're unyielding.
Stuck fast, doesn't move.
Right. This comes from Old English fest and is of Germanic origin, related to German fest, meaning firm, solid. So in this sense, fast means unmoving, secure, stable, resolute.
Okay, the fixed fast.
But then we have fast meaning rapid in movement, as in running fast or a fast car.
Speedy fast.
This sense developed in Middle English from adverbial uses like strongly, vigorously, and close, immediate, which later led to the idea of rapid movement and its adjectival use. Fast food itself, referring to quick preparation, only dates from the 1950s.
So one fast means stationary and firm, and the other means quick and fleeting. How did that happen? Did they start the same?
That's the key question.
It's truly fascinating how fast has these two completely opposite primary meanings. It raises an important question. Is it merely a phonetic coincidence where two distinct words happen to converge on the same spelling and pronunciation over centuries?
Which is what linguists usually think, right?
Generally, yes. Or does it reflect some deeper human tension between stability and dynamism? Linguistically, it's generally considered a coincidence of phonology, but the poetic irony is undeniable.
It really is.
It forces us to appreciate the nuanced role of context in understanding language without it. Understanding which fast is meant would be utterly impossible. It's a prime example of how the same word can carry completely opposing semantic loads, demanding our careful attention to the surrounding words.
Context is king. Okay, next let's look at fade.
Fade, to disappear slowly.
Right, in Middle English, the early sense of fade was grow weak, waste away, a gradual decline. It comes from Old French fodder, from fade, meaning dull, insipid. Probably a blend of Latin fatuous, silly, insipid, and vapidus is vapid.
So, weak, dull, insipid, fading away.
Exactly. The sense lose freshness or lose color, as in faded colors or faded glory, developed alongside that earlier English meaning of lose strength. It beautifully captures the gradual loss of intensity, whether it's physical vitality, visual vibrancy, or even metaphorical power.
It's a word for impermanence, for things slowly diminishing into nothingness.
Then there's fad.
Fad. Here today, gone tomorrow.
Pretty much. This word, meaning a short-lived enthusiasm or a fleeting trend, emerged in the mid-19th century. It was originally dialect and is probably the second element of fid-fad, which was a contraction of fiddle-faddle, meaning trifling talk or nonsense.
Fiddle-faddle again. Like fibbin.
Related idea, yeah. So the short-lived and often insubstantial nature of a fad seems to be directly linked to its origin in trifling talk.
Yeah.
Something ephemeral and not substantial here today, gone tomorrow, just like idle chatter.
It's a linguistic shrug at things that lack real staying power.
I like that, a linguistic shrug. Now, for something a bit more straightforward yet fundamental, final and finish.
The end. Finis.
Exactly. Both of these words clearly derive from the Latin finis, meaning simply end or limit. Final, as an adjective, first meant conclusive, and later became a noun for a deciding game or the last of a series of examinations.
The final exam. The cup final.
Right. Finish, as a verb, comes from the Latin finire, also from finis, meaning to end or to limit. As a noun, it can refer to a completed or perfected state, as in a smooth finish on a surface, or the end point of a race.
The finish line.
So these words consistently convey the concept of an end, completion, or a defined boundary. They are linguistic markers of closure. No big surprises here.
Just straightforward endings?
Feud is another word that speaks to enduring conflict, a stark contrast to fleeting fads.
Feud. Long-term fighting.
Yes. In Middle English, its spelling was jede, meaning hostility, ill will. It comes from Old French feed, from Germanic origin, and is directly linked to the word foe, an enemy.
Foe and feud. Related.
Directly. Feud highlights long-standing, often bitter conflict between parties or families, suggesting animosity that, by its very nature, persists and defines relationships over generations. It's not a momentary disagreement, but a deep-seated, prolonged antagonism.
The opposite of fleeting. It endures.
On the more positive side of endurance and stability, we have fidelity.
Fidelity. Faithfulness, loyalty.
Exactly. This word from late Middle English comes from Old French fidelit, or Latin fidelitas, which means faithful, from fidelis, meaning faith or trust.
Fidos, faith. Clear connection.
Right. So fidelity directly reinforces the idea of faith, trustworthiness, and loyalty, representing something that holds firm and endures. Whether in relationships, in the accurate reproduction of sound or image, like high-fidelity audio,
Hi-fi. Right. True to the original.
or in adherence to a principle, it's about steadfastness, a counterpoint to the fleeting.
Staying true. Holding fast, you might say.
Nice callback. Another fascinating pair of homographs, much like fell, is flight.
Flight. Flying. Or running away.
Both. This word has at least two distinct meanings that share a common characteristic of movement. First, flight meaning the action or manner of flying, as in a bird in flight, or even a flight of stairs, a set of stairs designed for ascending. This comes from Old English flight, and is of Germanic origin. Second, flight meaning an escape, or the action of fleeing, as in take flight from danger.
Getting away.
This meaning probably merged in Middle English with an unrecorded Old English word related to the German Flucht and the verb flee.
Flee and flight. Makes sense. Both concepts involve rapid movement, often upward or outward.
But one is typically controlled, purposeful, and sometimes joyful, as with birds in the sky.
While the other is an uncontrolled, desperate dash to get away from peril. It's an interesting linguistic convergence where a shared characteristic of rapid movement leads to distinct yet tangentially related applications.
It really forces us to consider the nuances within what seem to be identical words, showing how context is everything when interpreting these linguistic twins.
Absolutely.
Next up, flux.
Flux, constant change. Flowing.
Exactly. This word, dating from late Middle English, comes from the Latin fluxus, meaning literally the process of flowing, from fluere to flow.
Like fluid.
Right. Its current sense, a continuous succession of changes, or a state of constant change, as in the phrase, in the state of flux, dates from the early 17th century. It's a beautiful liquid state metaphor for constant, often unpredictable change, like a river that never stops flowing, always shifting its currents.
It highlights the fleeting, ever-moving nature of things, the antithesis of stasis.
Then there's forlorn.
Forlorn, sad, lonely, abandoned.
That's the modern feel, yes. This word from Old English forlorn originally meant depraved, morally abandoned, literally lost completely.
Morally lost, not just sad.
Originally, yes. It's the past participle of forliosen, to lose, and is of Germanic origin. The sense of being morally lost or utterly deserted was strong, but its prime current sense is quite different. Pitiable, sad, and lonely, often implying desolation or hopelessness.
So it shifted from moral degradation or being utterly lost in a literal sense to a deeply emotional state of desolation and loneliness.
Yeah. The meaning moved from an objective condition of abandonment to a subjective, empathetic feeling, often evoking compassion.
This shift in forlorn is quite poignant. It moved from a state of being lost in a moral or physical sense to being lost in an emotional and social sense, evoking pity rather than condemnation.
A softening of the meaning.
Perhaps, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it might suggest an evolution in human empathy, where a state of abandonment or deep sadness, regardless of its original cause, came to elicit compassion and understanding. It's a linguistic mirror to our changing societal understanding of vulnerability and isolation, shifting from judgment to sympathy.
That's a beautiful thought. And finally, in this section, we have firm when referring to a company.
A business firm, how is that firm?
Good question. The sense of the word, appearing in the late 16th century, comes from the Spanish or Italian firma, via medieval Latin from firmare, meaning fix, settle, which in turn is based on the adjective firmus, meaning firm or solid.
Ah, firm is solid. Okay.
Originally, firma referred to an autograph or signature, something that fixed or settled an agreement, making it firm and legally binding.
Your signature makes it firm.
Exactly. By the mid-18th century, it became the name under which a business was transacted. And then in the late 18th century, it came to mean the business itself.
So the signature, then the name, then the company.
Right. This links directly back to firm, meaning solid or fixed, showing how a firm or company is meant to be a stable, established, and dependable entity in the marketplace. Something fixed and secure, something you can rely on.
It's the enduring aspect of business captured in its name. Makes sense.
So what does this all mean? Whether it's the curious duality of fast, where one word means both stable and rapid,
The transformation of an abandoned soul into a forlorn one.
or the very idea of a firm as a stable, established entity. These words highlight how our language holds the tension between constancy and change.
They give us new ways to fathom the world, to truly grasp its complexities, revealing how deeply paradox is woven into the very fabric of our communication. These F words have truly taken us on an incredible journey.
They really have. So you've seen how a deep dive into just one letter of the dictionary can unearth this absolute treasure trove of stories.
It's amazing what's hiding in there.
From the humble fable to the surprisingly feisty origin of some words, language truly is a living archive, constantly shifting, blending, and sometimes playfully contradicting itself.
We've explored how words rooted in the act of making could evolve into words of faking.
How fables led to fabulous dualities that now encompass both the untrue and the wonderfully astonishing.
We've seen how seemingly everyday words hold surprising, sometimes hilarious, hidden meanings just beneath their familiar surfaces.
And this truly enriches how we communicate, doesn't it? And how we understand the world around us. It gives us a deeper appreciation for every syllable we utter.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it underscores that words are not static definitions carved in stone. They are dynamic echoes of human experience, constantly shifting and evolving with our perceptions, our technologies, our societal norms.
They're alive.
Exactly. The journey of these F words reveals layers of cultural insight, historical shifts, and even human psychology embedded in the very sounds we make and the concepts we choose to name. This raises an important question for you, the listener, to ponder. Which other common words in your everyday vocabulary might be hiding equally fantastic and unexpected histories, just waiting for you to uncover them?
Yeah. What's the story behind table or blue? You start wondering.
Exactly.
So next time you use a word, any word at all, maybe pause for just a moment Consider the incredible winding journey it might have taken to arrive on your tongue.
Think about how its past might still subtly influence its present meaning.
And what that tells you about the ever-unfolding story of human communication, a story that you are in every word you choose and every meaning you convey, helping to write.